Drop it. Drop it right now. Don't make me say it again. Look at me.
I said get on the ground. Now.
I'm not a threat. You're pointing authority, not control.
You're resisting a lawful order.
No. I'm standing still, and you're about to cross a line you can't walk back.
The shout didn't come from a position of control. It came from a place of panic. It cut through the humid afternoon air of the hardware store parking lot, causing heads to turn and conversations to cease. But the man standing at the back of the pristine forest green Ford F-150 didn't flinch. He didn't jump. He didn't gasp. Marcus Thorne simply stopped moving. At 58 years old, Marcus had spent more time in combat zones than the screaming officer behind him had been alive. He held a 2x4 piece of treated lumber in his right hand, balancing it effortlessly. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt that clung to a chest built by decades of discipline and cargo pants that were utilitarian, not fashionable. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now!" The voice cracked again. Marcus slowly, deliberately lowered the piece of wood into the bed of the truck. He didn't throw it. He placed it. Then he raised both hands, palms open, fingers spread wide, showing the world and the jittery man behind him that he held nothing but air. He turned around slowly, moving with the fluid grace of a man whose joints still remembered the weight of a rucksack. Standing 10 feet away was Officer Kyle Braden. He looked young, maybe 29, with a high and tight haircut that looked fresh and a uniform that looked too stiff. His hand was hovering over his holstered sidearm, his fingers twitching near the grip. The retention strap was already undone. That was a bad sign. It meant he had already decided that deadly force was on the table before he had even assessed the situation. "My hands are empty," Officer Marcus said. His voice was a low rumble, calm as a deeply buried stone. It wasn't the voice of a man pleading. It was the voice of a man giving a situation report. "I am loading lumber for a deck repair. I have the receipt in my front left pocket. I am moving very slowly." "I didn't ask for your life story. I said get on the ground," Braden yelled, stepping forward but keeping his distance, violating the basic reactionary gap principles that Marcus had taught to thousands of soldiers. Officer Marcus said, planting his feet shoulder-width apart. "I am not getting on the ground. The asphalt is 110 degrees and I have bad knees from jumping out of airplanes for this country. I am standing right here. I am not a threat. You need to take a breath and tell me what the problem is." This was the wrong thing to say to Officer Braden. Braden had been on the force for 3 years, and in his mind, authority was absolute. Authority was not to be questioned by a black man in a truck in a nice part of town. Braden saw the confidence in Marcus's eyes, not as compliance, but as defiance. He saw the size of the man, 6'2", broad shoulders, and felt his own stature shrinking. "You are resisting a lawful order," Braden shouted, his voice echoing off the corrugated metal of the store's siding. "We have a report of a theft in progress involving a suspect matching your description, loading stolen goods into a vehicle." Marcus looked at the lumber. He looked at the Home Depot receipt clearly visible on the dashboard through the windshield. He looked back at Braden. "A suspect matching my description," Marcus asked, his eyebrow raising a fraction of an inch. "Officer, look around. This is a hardware store. There are 50 men here loading lumber. Half of them are wearing gray shirts. Is the description black male breathing oxygen?" "Don't get smart with me," Braden snapped. He drew his taser now, the yellow plastic weapon shaking slightly in his grip. The red laser dot danced across Marcus's chest, landing right over his heart. "Turn around and face the vehicle. Hands behind your head. Do it now or I will light you up." Marcus didn't move. He knew the effective range of that taser. He knew the neuromuscular incapacitation it caused. But he also knew that if he turned his back now, he lost the only thing keeping him alive: eye contact. He needed this boy to see him as a human being, not a target. "I am not turning around." Marcus stated, his voice hardening just enough to sound like command, not conversation. "You have a weapon drawn on an unarmed man who is cooperating. You are escalating a non-threatening situation. There are cameras on this building. There are people watching. Think about your next move, son, because you are making a mistake that you cannot undo." The air in the parking lot seemed to thicken heavy with the scent of hot asphalt and the impending violence of the state. Officer Braden's face was flushing a deep, blotchy red. He wasn't used to this. He was used to fear. He was used to people scrambling, begging, crying, or running. He wasn't used to a man standing like a statue lecturing him on escalation of force. It made Braden feel small, and for a man like him, feeling small was the most dangerous trigger of all. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Braden hissed, stepping closer, closing the distance to maybe 6 feet. "Get on the ground. And I am telling you for the last time." "No," Marcus replied. He hadn't shifted his weight. His hands remained perfectly still in the air, visible to everyone. "I know the law, officer. Under Terry versus Ohio, you are allowed to detain me only if you have reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. You said you had a report of theft. I am offering you the receipt. It is right there. If you check the receipt, your suspicion evaporates. If you refuse to check it and continue to hold me at gunpoint, you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. Is that what you want to do today?" Bystanders had stopped loading their cars. A woman 2 rows over had already pulled out her phone. A young man in a contractor's vest was filming from behind a stack of plywood. The audience was assembling, but Braden was too tunnel-visioned to notice the gallery. He only saw the obstacle in front of him. "You're a lawyer now." "Is that it?" Braden sneered, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I'm not a lawyer," Marcus said. "But I spent 30 years in the United States Army. I was a ranger. I served as a command sergeant major. I have written rules of engagement for operations in countries you couldn't find on a map. I know when a man is a threat, and I know when a man is on a power trip. You are on a power trip." The mention of military service should have paused the encounter. It should have been the moment Braden lowered the taser, asked for an ID, and de-escalated. Police departments love to talk about their respect for veterans, but Braden didn't hear veteran. He heard, "I'm better than you." He heard a challenge to his badge. "Stolen valor isn't going to help you here, pal," Braden spat out. "I don't care if you're the Secretary of Defense. You're refusing to identify, and you're resisting." "I haven't refused to identify," Marcus corrected him, his patience thinning but his discipline holding like a dam against a flood. "I told you where my identification is. It is in my back pocket. I told you I would reach for it if you lowered your weapon. I am not reaching for anything while you have a taser pointed at my chest. That is how people get killed. You tell me, do you want to see my ID or do you want to hurt me? I want to search the vehicle," Braden announced, suddenly shifting the goalposts. He realized the theft angle was weak, so he needed to find something else, something illegal in the truck. A weapon, drugs, anything to justify the stop. "On what grounds?" Marcus asked. "Probable cause. You're acting suspicious. You're being belligerent. I smell marijuana." Braden lied. It was a clumsy, desperate lie. The wind was blowing away from the officer, and Marcus hadn't smoked a day in his life. He was a man who still ran 5 miles every morning and ironed his jeans. "You do not smell marijuana," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous in its flatness. "Now, you are fabricating evidence. The cameras are recording, officer. The witnesses are recording. Do not go down this road. Open the rest of the truck." "Step away so I can search it," Braden commanded, ignoring the warning. "I do not consent to any searches," Marcus said firmly. "I am asserting my rights under the Constitution of the United States. The same Constitution I swore an oath to defend against enemies foreign and domestic. Right now, officer, you are acting like a domestic enemy of that Constitution." That was the breaking point. Braden holstered the taser and reached for his radio, keying the mic. Dispatch. I have a non-compliant subject at the Home Depot on 4th. Resisting arrest. Send backup. He looked at Marcus with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. You want to do this the hard way? Fine. We'll do it the hard way. The term resisting arrest does a lot of heavy lifting in police reports. It suggests a struggle, a fight, a chaotic brawl where officers are in danger. But in the parking lot that Saturday, the only thing struggling was Officer Braden's ego. Marcus stood perfectly still as the siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. He watched Braden unclip the handcuffs from his belt. Turn around, Braden barked, approaching Marcus from the rear quarter. Hands behind your back. Marcus had a choice. Every instinct honed in the jungles of Panama, the deserts of Iraq, and the mountains of Afghanistan screamed at him to neutralize the threat. He knew 14 different ways to disarm this man before Braden could even blink. He could shatter the officer's wrist, sweep his leg, and have him pinned to the asphalt in under 3 seconds. It would be easy. It would be satisfying. And it would be a death sentence. Marcus knew that if he moved a muscle in aggression, he would be just another violent suspect on the evening news. They would talk about his size, not his service. They would talk about his aggression, not his rights. To win this war, he had to lose this battle. He had to submit to the humiliation. I am complying, Marcus said, loud enough for the camera phone 20 feet away to pick up. I am placing my hands behind my back. I am not resisting. He rotated his shoulders, bringing his wrists together at the small of his back. The flexibility wasn't what it used to be, and his rotator cuff ached from an old shrapnel injury, but he did it. Braden grabbed Marcus's wrists with unnecessary force, wrenching them upward. Stop tensing up! Braden yelled for the benefit of the audience, though Marcus's arms were limp. I am not tensing, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Watch the left shoulder. It has surgical pins. Braden didn't care about surgical pins. He slapped the steel cuffs onto Marcus's wrists and tightened them. He squeezed them down until they bit into the skin, cutting off circulation. It was a petty vindictive move, the pain compliance of a bully. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, and resisting arrest, Braden recited, spinning Marcus around. He shoved him toward the patrol car. Officer A voice shouted from the crowd. It was the guy in the contractor vest. He didn't do anything. We have it all on video. He was just standing there. Back up or you're next, Braden screamed at the witness, pointing a finger. This is an active investigation. Back the hell up. Marcus caught the eye of the man filming. He gave a sharp single nod. Keep filming. Don't stop. Braden marched Marcus to the cruiser. He didn't open the door gently. He grabbed Marcus by the back of the neck, forcing his head down. Get in. Marcus maneuvered his large frame into the cramped back seat of the Ford Explorer. The plastic seat was hard. The cage was claustrophobic. The air conditioning wasn't reaching the back, and the heat began to build immediately. As the door slammed shut, sealing him in, Marcus closed his eyes for a brief second. He inhaled deeply through his nose, exhaling through his mouth. He wasn't thinking about the discomfort. He wasn't thinking about the cuffs digging into his wrists. He was thinking about the mission. The mission had changed. It was no longer about fixing his deck. It was about fixing this department. Braden climbed into the front seat, breathing heavily, adrenaline still dumping into his system. He looked in the rear-view mirror, expecting to see a broken man. Instead, he saw Marcus sitting upright, staring straight ahead with a look of terrifying calm. You made a big mistake today, pal, Braden said, starting the engine. My name is Command Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne, United States Army, retired, Marcus said. And you are correct. A very big mistake has been made, but you are confused about who made it. The drive to the precinct was short, maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Braden blasted the radio to drown out the silence, but the silence from the back seat was louder than the dispatch chatter. Marcus sat motionless, cataloging everything. He noted the speed Braden was driving, 45 in a 35 zone without lights or sirens. He noted the way Braden kept glancing in the rearview mirror, looking for a reaction that never came. He noted the time, 2:14 p.m. When they pulled into the sally port of the precinct, the automatic door rattled down behind them, cutting off the sunlight. The artificial buzz of fluorescent lights took over. Braden hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. Move it." Braden grunted, pulling on the handcuffs. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It smelled of industrial cleaner stale coffee and misery. This was the digestive tract of the justice system where citizens were processed into inmates. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was a dinosaur in the department, 55 years old, thick around the middle, with a mustache that had been out of style since 1995. He was reading a sports magazine, looking bored. He looked up as Braden wrestled Marcus toward the bench. Miller's eyes went from Braden to Marcus, and he paused. He didn't see a thug. He didn't see a junkie. He saw a man who carried himself with a specific kind of posture that Miller recognized instantly. Miller had done 4 years in the Marines back in the 80s. He knew the look. "What do we have here?" Braden Miller asked, his voice gravelly. Disorderly obstruction, resisting Braden, listed off, puffing his chest out. Guy wouldn't listen. Acting aggressive in the parking lot. Suspect in a theft call. Theft, Miller asked, looking at Marcus's expensive cargo pants and the $200 tactical watch on his wrist. What did he steal the Declaration of Independence? He matched a description, Braden said defensively, and he refused to ID. Miller sighed. He stood up and walked around the desk. "All right, sir, I'm going to need to take your personal effects. Turn around so I can remove the cuffs." Braden bristled. "Sarge, he's combative." "Keep him on." Miller shot Braden a look that could peel paint. "I think I can handle him, Kyle. Unlock the cuffs." Braden reluctantly unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus brought his arms forward, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness. Deep red indentations ringed his wrists, the skin broken in one spot where the metal had pinched. "Empty your pockets onto the counter, please," Miller said, his tone respectful. Marcus reached into his pockets. He pulled out the Home Depot receipt and laid it flat, smoothing the wrinkles. "That is the receipt for the lumber in my truck," he said softly. Then he pulled out his wallet. He placed it on the counter. Miller opened the wallet to inventory the contents. "All right, let's see. Driver's license? Marcus Thorne. Credit cards." Miller stopped. He pulled out a card that wasn't a credit card. It was a chaotic mix of colors, blue, white, and gold. It was a Department of Defense retired identification card, but underneath that was another card, laminated and old. A membership card for the Ranger Association. And tucked behind that was a folded miniaturized copy of a DD-214, something old soldiers sometimes carried for VA discounts. Miller's eyes scanned the small print on the folded paper. Rank E9 Command Sergeant Major. Awards. Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, 3 OLC Purple Heart, 2 OLC. Miller froze. The air left his lungs. He looked at the Silver Star citation reference. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a war hero, a man who had operated at the highest tier of the military. Miller looked up at Marcus. He looked at the red marks on Marcus's wrists. Then he looked at Officer Braden, who was leaning against the wall, checking his phone, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb that was about to go off in his career. Braden Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah, Sarge. Did you run this man's name before you brought him in?" "System was slow. I figured we'd do it here." "Why?" "He have a warrant." Miller closed the wallet gently, treating it like a holy relic. He looked at the young officer with a mixture of pity and fury. "No, you idiot. He doesn't have a warrant. He has a Silver Star." The silence that followed Sergeant Miller's words was absolute. Officer Braden looked up from his phone, a confused frown creasing his forehead. "He has a what? A silver star, you moron!" Miller barked, the volume rising. "Do you know what that is?" "It means while you were playing video games in your mom's basement, this man was bleeding out in a jungle somewhere saving American lives." Miller turned back to Marcus. His demeanor had shifted from processing officer to subordinate soldier. "Sergeant Major, I need to apologize. There seems to be a massive failure in communication here." Marcus didn't smile. He didn't relax. "There was no failure in communication, Sergeant. The communication was crystal clear. Your officer communicated that he does not know the law, does not respect the Constitution, and does not possess the temperament to carry a badge. I communicated that I was innocent. He chose to arrest me anyway." Miller swallowed hard. "I'm going to get the watch commander. Right now. Please just take a seat. Not in the cell, just here in the chair." Miller grabbed the wallet and the paperwork and practically ran out of the room toward the administrative offices. Braden stood there, the color draining from his face. He started to realize that Silver Star wasn't a type of beer. He looked at Marcus. "You didn't tell me you were a vet," Braden stammered, his voice losing its edge. "I told you I was a ranger," Marcus said, not looking at him. "I told you I served 30 years. You told me it was stolen valor. You told me you didn't care. I thought you were lying." Braden said, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "Assumption is the mother of all screw-ups," Officer Marcus said. "You assumed I was a criminal because of how I look. You assumed I was lying because of your own bias. And now you are assuming that an apology is going to fix this. It is not." The door to the back offices flew open. Captain Reynolds strode in, followed closely by a pale-looking Sergeant Miller. Reynolds was a tall man, balding, with the weary look of a man who spent his days putting out fires. This wasn't a fire. This was an inferno. Reynolds walked straight to Marcus. He didn't offer a handshake. He knew he hadn't earned it yet. "Mr. Thorne," Reynolds began. "It's—" Sergeant Major Thorne Marcus corrected him instantly. Sergeant Major Thorne Reynolds corrected himself, flinching slightly. "I've just been briefed by Sergeant Miller. I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience. We're going to release you immediately. No charges will be filed. We'll get you a ride back to your vehicle right now." It was the standard, make it go away play. Release the guy, say sorry, hope he doesn't sue. It usually worked. Marcus stood up slowly. He towered over the captain. "Captain, I was handcuffed in front of my neighbors. I was threatened with a taser. I was kidnapped, because that is what a false arrest is, and brought here. My wrists are bleeding. My Fourth Amendment rights were violated. And you want to call it an inconvenience? We will review the body camera footage, of course," Reynolds said, shifting his weight. "If Officer Braden acted outside of policy, he will be disciplined." If Marcus let out a short, dry laugh. "Captain, I want all the data preserved. I want the body cam, the dash cam, the booking room audio, the dispatch logs. I want it all flagged for litigation, because I am not just walking out of here. I am going to tear this department's training manual apart in federal court." Reynolds looked at Braden. Braden looked at the floor. Sergeant Major Reynolds tried again, his voice lower. "We can work this out. We can—" "I am leaving now," Marcus interrupted. "I will take that ride to my truck. And, Captain, you better take Officer Braden's gun, because he is a liability, and after my lawyers are done with him, he won't be qualified to guard a mall kiosk." The ride back to the Home Depot was silent, but this time it wasn't a patrol car. Captain Reynolds drove Marcus personally in his unmarked sedan. He tried to make small talk twice. Marcus ignored him both times, staring out the window at the passing suburbs, his mind already drafting the tactical plan for the weeks ahead. When they arrived at the parking lot, Marcus's truck was still there. But so were 3 news vans. The video had gone up. The young man in the contractor vest hadn't wasted time. He had uploaded the footage to TikTok and Twitter with the caption, "Cop threatens calm black veteran over lumber." It had been online for less than 2 hours, but the algorithm had caught fire. "Oh, God," Reynolds whispered as he saw the news crews circling the truck. Marcus opened the door. "Thank you for the ride, Captain. I suggest you get back to the station and start writing your press release. You're going to need it." Marcus stepped out and was immediately swarmed. Microphones were thrust in his face. "Sir, are you the man in the video? Did he really tase you? What were you charged with?" Marcus held up a hand. The press quieted down. He knew how to command a room or a parking lot. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice projecting clearly. "I served this country for 30 years. Today, I was arrested for loading lumber into my own vehicle. The officer involved threatened my life because he lacked the training and the temperament to do his job. I was released without charges because they realized they had messed with the wrong man. But I want you to ask yourselves, what if I wasn't a sergeant major? What if I was just a kid? What if I didn't know the law? That is the story you should be telling. Excuse me." He got into his truck, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the captain standing in the parking lot surrounded by sharks. When Marcus got home, his wife Sarah was waiting in the driveway. She had seen the video. Her eyes were red. She had been married to a ranger for 3 decades. She was a woman of steel, but seeing her husband treated like a criminal on a smartphone screen had shaken her. Marcus parked the truck and got out. Sarah ran to him, hugging him fiercely. "I saw it. I saw him point the gun. Marcus, he could have killed you." "He thought about it," Marcus said, holding her tight, feeling the adrenaline finally start to crash, leaving him exhausted. But he didn't. "I'm here." "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked, pulling back to look at his wrists. She gasped when she saw the cuts. "We're suing them, right? Tell me we're destroying them." Marcus walked into his house, the house he had bought with his VA loan, the house that held the flag of his grandfather who served in World War II. He walked to his study and sat down at his mahogany desk. "Sarah," he said, picking up the phone. "Get me the number for David Cohen." David Cohen was a shark. He was a civil rights attorney who had made a career out of suing police departments for excessive force. He and Marcus had served on a veterans board together years ago. "We aren't just suing them," Marcus said, dialing the number. "We are going to teach them a lesson in accountability that they will be reading about in the academy for the next 20 years. The lawsuit, Thorne versus City of San Diego, was filed 72 hours later. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It didn't just allege misconduct. It dissected Officer Braden's actions second by second, citing Supreme Court violations like a sniper calling out windage and elevation. The body cam footage was released the next day. If the bystander video was a spark, the body cam was gasoline. The high-definition audio captured every tremble in Braden's voice, every calm, logical rebuttal from Marcus. It showed the moment Braden realized the theft excuse was garbage and pivoted to the search demand. It showed the rough handling. And most damning of all, it captured Braden muttering arrogant prick under his breath as he shoved Marcus into the car. The media narrative was unstoppable. Hero versus Zero became the headline on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. For once, the country was united. The right saw a decorated veteran and a patriot being abused by incompetent government overreach. The left saw a black man being racially profiled and brutalized by the police. Officer Braden had managed to achieve the impossible. He had united a polarized America against him. Braden was placed on administrative leave. The police union released a tepid statement about waiting for all the facts, but they knew it was a losing battle. You don't win a PR war against a Silver Star recipient who looks like a grandfather and speaks like a prophet. Marcus didn't hide. He went on Good Morning America. He sat there in a suit, calm and articulate. "This isn't about me," Marcus told the host. "I can take a hit. I've been hit by worse things than Officer Braden. This is about the young men who look like me who don't have my rank. When Officer Braden saw me, he didn't see a citizen with rights. He saw a subject to be dominated. That mindset is a cancer, and if we don't cut it out, it's going to kill the host." The discovery phase of the lawsuit was brutal. Marcus's lawyer Cohen requested Braden's entire disciplinary history. They found what they expected: 6 prior complaints of excessive force, all against minorities, all dismissed by Internal Affairs as unfounded. They knew, Marcus said, looking at the files on his kitchen table. They knew he was a problem, and they left him on the street with a gun. They ignored the red flags, Cohen said. Now they're going to pay for them. The city attorney called a week later. They didn't want to go to trial. They didn't want a jury to look at Marcus Thorne, look at the video, and then look at the city's bank account. They wanted to settle. "They're offering $500,000, Cohen said. "No," Marcus said. "600, no." "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want Braden's badge," Marcus said. "I want him fired, not resigned. Fired, with a permanent mark on his record so he can't go one town over and be a cop there. And I want policy changes on stop and frisk procedures. And I want $825,000, $1,000 for every day I served in the Rangers. The city folded. They had no choice. The public pressure was crushing the mayor's approval ratings, and the Department of Justice was sniffing around talking about a consent decree. Officer Kyle Braden was terminated for cause on a Tuesday morning. The chief of police announced it in a press conference, citing conduct unbecoming and violation of civil rights. Braden tried to fight it, but the union wouldn't back him. He was radioactive. He turned in his badge and his gun, and for the first time in his adult life, he had to face the world without the shield of authority he had abused. The settlement check arrived 2 weeks later, $825,000. Marcus held the check in his hand. It was a life-changing amount of money. It could pay off the house, buy a boat fund, a lavish retirement. But Marcus didn't buy a boat. He sat down with Sarah and they made a plan. They kept enough to ensure their security, but the bulk of the money went into a new trust, the Thorne Legal Defense Fund for Veterans. Its mission was to provide top-tier legal representation for veterans who were mistreated by law enforcement or the justice system. "We turn the pain into power," Marcus said, signing the paperwork. 6 months later, Marcus was back at Home Depot. He needed to finish that deck. He walked through the parking lot, pushing a cart of lumber. He stopped at the exact spot where he had been arrested. The asphalt looked the same. The sun felt the same. But the air felt different. It felt lighter. A police cruiser rolled slowly through the lot. The officer behind the wheel saw Marcus. It was a young woman this time. She didn't glare. She didn't speed up. She slowed down, looked at Marcus, and gave a respectful wave. Marcus nodded back. He loaded his lumber one board at a time. He wasn't just a victim who got paid. He was a soldier who had won his final battle. He had held the line. He had defended the Constitution one last time, not with a rifle, but with his character. He closed the tailgate of his truck. It clicked shut with a solid, definitive sound. Marcus got in, checked his mirrors, and drove home. We often think of heroes as people who run into fire, but sometimes courage is simply standing still when everything in you wants to fight. Marcus Thorne proved that true authority doesn't scream and it doesn't bully. True authority is calm, it is just, and it protects those who cannot protect themselves. This story forces us to ask a hard question. If a man with a silver star and 30 years of service can be treated like a criminal in broad daylight, what happens to the people who don't have those credentials? What happens to the people whose voices aren't deep enough to command a room? Marcus fought back, but he shouldn't have had to. I want to hear from you. Do you think the settlement was enough, or should the officer have faced criminal charges for the false arrest? And have you ever had to stay calm in a situation where you wanted to scream? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. We tell these stories because the truth deserves a witness.